A couple of years ago, I stumbled across Steve on a farm on the outskirts of Howick, who had built a collection of tiny homes. I thought this is the perfect place to start our YouTube channel, chatting to Steve about some of the pros and cons of the different tiny home variants.
Tiny houses in South Africa is, it's like a struggle. A lot of people talking about these sort of communities, but you've just sort of done one.
Mm.
Why?
Why did I do it?
Yeah.
Or why is there no other...
Why did you do it? Why
I
is
did
this
it because I was curious and I had a bit of time on my hands.
and money?
Yeah, don't forget that, because it's actually blooming expensive. And I think that's why it hasn't worked here.
Okay.
Because it's considerably more expensive in this country than conventional.
What's expensive about it?
The unexpected expenses for me were insulation. So I like most people who are curious, they'll try the conversions, the shipping container conversions. That is a tough one. You've got so much steel exposed to the elements, hot and cold's your problem. So you start exploring different ways of insulation, and the costs start building there. I think the biggest differential between the costs here and overseas are obviously labour. And what I realised, having been a sort of amateur builder for some time, we've built all our own homes and factories and so on, so we understand how reasonably you can build in this country, as opposed to countries where a basic labour rate is maybe 8 or more times what we're paying here. Here we can still get a bricklayer who's reasonably good at 300 rand, 350 rand a day.
Yeah.
With an assistant for 200 rand a day, and between the two of them, they laying bricks and making or blocks and making it happen at prices you wouldn't even dream of doing overseas. So overseas, you're looking at first-time home buyers who might take a structure like this and go, oh well, it's small, but I can afford it. Here in SA, this is a curiosity. It's fun, but it's so much more expensive than the conventional. Example, we finished some of these at 17 grand a square meter.
Sure.
Okay. Now that's for some of the smaller units. So bearing in mind you've got your ablutions, you've got your kitchen, the more expensive elements of a build, all in a very small spot. So if that's all in 20 square meters, your square meter price is high. But you can build, granted a slightly bigger building, for 4.5 grand a square meter.
Exactly. Yeah.
Brick or block on concrete. Minimal plumbing, minimal electrics. But
It is possible. I'm convinced it's possible.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got upwards of 10 grand certainly, even on a very basic finish on a tiny house, versus somewhere between 3 and say 4.5 grand if you're a first-time builder.
But you haven't done these as cheaply as possible. They are cladded inside with plywood as opposed to drywalling. This is a nice metal structure. You've done 4 different ones. You've done a conventional container home.
Yeah.
You've done the tiny home on wheels down there, the timber structure with the timber cladding.
Yeah.
You've done a light steel frame structure on the side here.
Yeah.
You've done this structure here, which is a more heavy metal conventional structure.
Yeah.
Pros and cons of each?
Well, firstly, yes, I did. I got excited, so I experimented with some of the more expensive materials, and each of the 4 was totally different to the last, and so there are cheaper ways of doing it. As I said briefly earlier, the container, as far as I'm concerned, is a no-no unless there's one in your yard and you really have to use it. Massive issues with that.
Yeah, they've just become way too expensive.
They are.
Number one.
They are, and beyond the expenses, that issue with the thermal, it's thermally about as tough as you can make a job.
Yeah, to insulate that.
Bad in the cold and bad in the heat, it's just terrible. So then the lightweight steel structure is probably the most sensible in that you can modulate, you can make it in modules, you can move it to site and erect quickly. The probably the least practical was the one on wheels. Again, I had to do it because
It's there to be done.
ability, it's there to be done. You start at 60 grand plus just for the flatbed trailer, and then you constricting yourself to 2.4 meters and all the other problems with a narrow roadworthy build. But it was probably the most fun that we did.
Okay.
So the most practical, probably the little 4.8 meter wide lightweight steel. The difference between 2.4 and 4.8 meters in living space is considerable.
Okay. A lot of people are out there wanting to do this, wanting to, not all of them obviously, but wanting to build a tiny home. They're keen on the community lifestyle.
Yeah.
What's it like with the community? You've got all 4 of these now rented out,
Yeah,
different
yeah.
tenants. How's that worked?
No, that's the fun part. But the brutal truth is, I could have built a lot more for the same amount of money, or built the same 4 spaces for considerably less. Oh yeah, so a lot of people wanting to build a tiny house are wanting it to be movable. They either don't own the land that they want to perch on, or they're not sure it's where they want to be forever, so they want to make one that's movable. Now there's a massive difference between building tiny and building movable tiny. If you want it to be movable, it is the most expensive of the options, and it's the most restrictive.
Yeah.
And I wonder if every tiny house ever built does actually need to be movable.
I agree with you.
If it's not essential, then I'd strongly recommend building more conventionally, but using the cool parts of tiny building, which is having a light footprint. Don't use more space than you absolutely need to. Don't confine yourself to 18 squares, but don't make 250 squares. Meet somewhere in between, and then use some of the cool elements of tiny building, like clever storage, and then again coming back to your community living and so on. Great, but build conventionally. You'll get a lot further for a lot less. It doesn't have to be exactly as I've explained earlier, with concrete down and brick on top. But use some elements of the modular. But one of the things that I've battled with is having always built with brick. The beauty there is you don't have little cavities for insects to live in, and rats and all that sort of stuff. And it's become a problem for us. That cavity in which you're going to put your insulation and so on I took for granted before that walls were never an issue. They're never a problem. You got your wall, boom, there it is. You might have to paint it again, but a wall's a wall. Once you put it up, you put it up. As soon as you build these, cladding in and out with your insulation in between, there's movement. There's gundans get in there and cockroaches and so on. I don't like it. Maybe I did it wrong, or maybe there's ways around that. But I want a solid wall.
Yeah.
Just give me a solid wall. Okay.
Just easy.
That's so much easier.
Or
fridge paneling. Fridge paneling is lovely. The urethane fridge paneling. I mean, if you can afford it, that's beautiful. Instant.
6 panels.
And it's so good with the thermal side of things. I've just put an extension to the butchery, and there's a beautiful double brick wall, beautifully pointed. It looks great. And right next to it, we've put. We took out a massive glass folding door, and we put paneling, insulative paneling, 40 mils, but it's the urethane one. And when you touch in the middle of a hot day like this, the brick wall is just hot,
And the fridge
the fridge paneling is cold, like the morning.
So what haven't you done? You've done these 4. Anyone else that you want to experiment with?
So what I didn't do is all the cob building. I've been on sites where they've been cob building, and I understand there's an attractiveness, but it takes an extreme amount of time. It's just so expensive on time. And when we were younger, we did build a stone building with my dad, with facing the bricks with hammers and so on, and that took so long as well. So those are pretty cool, but take too long. For me, the walls of a building should be the quickest.
The shell.
The shell. Put it up, boom, then get stuck in. So the design should take you a bit of time. The wall shouldn't. and then get on with the cool side of building sensibly and the layout and the finishes and so on. Walls should be up in 2 weeks. The other part of building, compact building, and that is
The fun of the
the
architecture.
fun of it, the architecture and the cool nooks and crannies and all that stuff. I think people get too hung up on using alternative materials and maybe on the tiny side making it movable when it shouldn't necessarily be. That was maybe my biggest mistake here.
Yeah.
All of these are, bar the lightweight steel one, are theoretically movable.
So it looks like movable structures are impractical and expensive, and just difficult to do and not feasible. But tiny home concepts are still feasible if done properly and using the right materials. Light steel frame structures may be the way to go. Well, like us and follow us, subscribe to the channel, hit the buttons below as we continue this journey to find the ultimate tiny house and see if it is feasible to do this cost effectively. Thanks for watching.